My name is Aaron Sterling. I was 34 years old, standing on a leg filled with titanium screws, when my own brother looked me in the eye and told me to find somewhere else to die. Before I tell you exactly what happened in that lawyer's office that changed everything, please take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. But only do it if you truly enjoy this story. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from right now. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. To understand why those words destroyed me, you have to understand the day they were spoken. It was a Tuesday. A cold, miserable Tuesday in November. The kind of rain that doesn't wash things clean but just makes everything look gray and tired. We had just buried our parents, Robert and Eleanor Sterling. They had died together, quickly, in a private plane crash on their way to a friend's wedding in Napa Valley. One minute they were here, the next they were just a memory and a pile of legal paperwork. I stood by the graveside long after everyone else had left. The mud was seeping into my good shoes, the only pair I had left from my old life as an architect. My right leg was throbbing. It's a deep, grinding ache that flares up whenever the barometric pressure drops. I leaned heavily on my cane, a simple wooden thing that had become my constant companion over the last 2 years. I watched the workers lower the caskets. I didn't cry. I think I was too hollowed out to cry. I just felt alone, truly, deeply alone. From the parking lot, I heard the aggressive revving of an engine. It was a sound I knew well. A Porsche Panamera, Turbo S, jet black. It belonged to my older brother, Julian. He hadn't waited for me. He hadn't offered me a ride, even though he knew walking was a battle for me. He had driven his wife, Brenda, straight from the graveside to our parents' house, the house I had been living in for the past 2 years. I limped to my own car, a 10-year-old sedan that had seen better days, and made the slow drive back to the estate. The Sterling estate was beautiful. That's the architect in me talking. It was a sprawling colonial revival in Connecticut, sitting on 4 acres of manicured gardens. Gardens that I had spent the last 18 months restoring with my own 2 hands, dragging my bad leg through the dirt because it was the only thing that made me feel useful. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Julian's Porsche parked right in front of the entrance, blocking the ramp I used. Of course, he knew I needed that ramp. He just didn't care. I parked on the street and made the slow, painful walk up the driveway. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through my suit jacket. By the time I opened the front door, I was shivering and my leg was screaming in protest. I walked into the living room. Julian and Brenda were already there. They weren't grieving. They weren't holding each other for comfort. They were walking around the room like they were shopping. Brenda was holding a crystal vase up to the light, inspecting the mark on the bottom. Julian was scrolling through his phone, looking bored. "You're finally here," Julian said, not even looking up. "Took you long enough." "It's raining, Julian," I said, leaning my cane against the sofa. "And you blocked the ramp." He shrugged. "Didn't notice. Look, sit down. We need to talk." I didn't sit. I stayed standing, gripping the back of my father's leather armchair for support. "Can't this wait? We just buried them 2 hours ago." "No, it can't wait," Brenda chimed in. She set the vase down with a sharp click. "Julian has meetings next week. We need to get the estate settled." "Settled?" I looked between them. "We haven't even met with the family lawyer yet. Mr. Blackwood said the reading of the will is in 5 days. Julian let out a short, sharp laugh. He walked over to the fireplace, leaning his arm against the mantel, striking a pose that looked practiced. "Blackwood is just a formality, Aaron. I've already spoken to him. As the eldest son and considering your situation, everything is pretty straightforward." "My situation?" I asked, my voice staying calm despite the rising heat in my chest. "You know," Julian waved his hand vaguely in my direction, "the disability, the lack of income, the fact that you've been living here off Mom and Dad's charity for 2 years. You're not exactly in a position to manage an estate like this." "I wasn't living off their charity," I said quietly. "I was taking care of them. I cooked their meals. I drove Dad to his cardiology appointments. I managed the grounds. You were gardening, Aaron? Brenda scoffed. Let's not make it sound like you were running a corporation. You were playing in the dirt because you couldn't work a real job anymore. That stung. It stung because it was partially true, and she knew exactly where to stick the knife. The point is, Julian interrupted, stepping closer. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale cigar smoke. We're listing the house. The market is hot right now. We need to clear it out by the end of the month. I froze. List the house? But where am I supposed to go? Julian looked at me, his eyes cold and flat. There was no brotherly love there. There wasn't even pity. There was just annoyance. That's not really our problem, is it? Julian said. You've had a free ride for 2 years. It's time to grow up. I have nowhere to go, Julian. My apartment is gone. My savings were wiped out by the surgeries. I need time. You have 2 weeks, Julian said, checking his watch. 2 weeks? I can't find an accessible apartment and move out in 2 weeks. I can barely walk to the mailbox without pain right now. Then go to a shelter. Or a motel, Brenda suggested, picking at a piece of lint on her designer dress. Surely you have some friends left? Or did they all leave when the money ran out? I looked at my brother. We had grown up in this house together. We had played catch in the backyard. We had shared bunk beds until we were 12. Julian, I said, my voice cracking slightly. Please, I'm your brother. I'm asking for a little time. A month. Just until the probate settles and I can get my share of the inheritance to put a deposit down on a place. Julian's face darkened. He took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. He lowered his voice, and for the first time, I saw the true depth of his contempt. Inheritance, he sneered. You think you're getting a payout? Aaron, look at you. You're a liability. Mom and Dad knew that. Why do you think they let you stay here? They pitied you, but they left the real decisions to the successful son. He poked a finger into my chest. Hard. You have 2 weeks. If you're not out, I'll have the sheriff throw you out. You can't do that, I whispered. I own this house now, Julian said. I can do whatever I want. He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back over his shoulder. He looked at my cane, then at my leg, then up to my eyes. A cruel smirk played on his lips. Actually, make it 10 days. I have realtors coming. Julian, please, I said. Where am I supposed to go? And that was when he said it. The words that would ring in my ears for the rest of my life. Find somewhere else to die, Aaron. You're useless now. He grabbed his coat, signaled to Brenda, and they walked out the front door, leaving it wide open to the rain. I stood there in the silence of the empty house. The wind blew rain onto the hardwood floor, the floor my mother had loved so much. I felt a tear finally roll down my cheek. Not from grief, but from a rage so hot it almost burned. Find somewhere else to die. I closed the door. I locked it, and then I turned around and looked at the empty hallway. No, I said to the empty room. Not yet. But to understand how I fought back, I have to take you back. Back to before the cane. Back to when I was the one with the future, and Julian was just the brother who spent too much money. 3 years ago, my life looked very different. I was a lead landscape architect for one of the biggest firms in Boston. I wasn't rich like Julian, who worked in high-risk hedge funds, but I was successful. I was engaged to a beautiful woman named Sarah. I ran marathons. I had a life that was moving forward in a straight, clear line. Then came the drunk driver. It was a random Tuesday night. I was driving home from a late client meeting. I had the green light. He didn't. The police said he hit my side of the car at 60 miles an hour. I don't remember the impact. I only remember waking up in the ICU 3 days later, with metal rods holding my spine together and a right leg that the doctors were debating whether or not to amputate. They saved the leg, but they couldn't save the life I had. The recovery took everything. My insurance maxed out. My savings drained away into copays and physical therapy not covered by my plan. Sarah, she tried. She really did. But after 6 months of me being unable to leave the apartment, unable to go out, Unable to be the man she fell in love with, she left. She left a note on the counter saying she couldn't handle the heaviness anymore. That was when my parents stepped in. "Come home, Aaron," my mom had said on the phone, her voice shaking. "Let us help you." So, at 32 years old, I moved back into my childhood bedroom. It was humiliating. It felt like a defeat so total I would never recover. But a strange thing happened those first few months back home. I started to see my parents not just as mom and dad, but as people. They were getting older. Dad's heart wasn't great. Mom's arthritis was making it hard for her to keep up with the house. For the first 6 months, I was in a wheelchair. I was angry at the world. But my dad, he would just sit with me. He wouldn't try to fix it. He'd just sit on the porch, smoking his pipe, and say, "The storm passes, son. The roots are still there. You just have to wait for the sun." Slowly, I started to heal. I moved from the wheelchair to a walker, then to the cane. And as I got stronger, I realized they were getting weaker. I started taking over. I cooked dinner because standing at the stove for 30 minutes was part of my physical therapy. I drove them to appointments because it gave me a sense of purpose. I took over the garden because I needed to touch the earth again. In 18 months, I transformed that estate. I restored the rose garden my mother loved. I built a raised vegetable bed so Dad wouldn't have to bend down. I became their caretaker. We became a team. And then there was Julian. Julian and Brenda lived in a penthouse in the city, about an hour away. They visited maybe once a month. And every visit was a performance. Julian would pull up in a different luxury car every few months, a Ferrari, a Mercedes, the Porsche. He'd stride into the house, talking loudly on his Bluetooth headset about deals and shorting the market. He'd bring expensive wine that my dad couldn't drink because of his heart medication. He treated me like I was invisible. Or worse, like I was a piece of broken furniture that they hadn't gotten around to throwing out yet. "Still hobbling around, Aaron?" he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to make me lose my balance. "When are you going to get a real job? You can't just mooch off mom and dad forever." "I'm helping them, Julian," I'd say. "Who do you think drove dad to the ER last week when his blood pressure spiked? You didn't answer your phone." "I was closing a deal," Julian would snap. "Some of us actually work for a living." My parents would usually go quiet during these exchanges. They never defended me. Not really. Mom would just say, "Boys, please, not at the table." Dad would look down at his plate. I used to resent them for that silence. I thought they were ashamed of me. I thought they agreed with Julian that I was the failure and he was the golden child. But the worst moment, the moment that I now realize sealed Julian's fate, happened last Christmas. It was a snowy December day. The house looked beautiful. I had spent 3 days hanging lights, dragging the ladder around the porch with my bad leg because I wanted it to be perfect for them. Julian and Brenda arrived with piles of gifts, flashy, impersonal things. An iPad for Mom, she didn't know how to use it. A set of golf clubs for Dad, who couldn't swing a club anymore. Brenda was obsessed with her social media image. "Okay, family photo time," she announced before dinner. "We need this for the Christmas card." She set up a tripod in the living room, in front of the fireplace I had just cleaned. "Okay, Mom, Dad, you sit in the armchairs," Brenda directed. "Julian, you stand behind Dad. I'll stand behind Mom." I stood up, grabbing my cane, ready to move into the frame. I started to walk toward the spot next to Julian. "Oh, wait," Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Aaron, maybe you could take the picture?" I stopped. "I can set the timer, Brenda. I'd like to be in the photo." Julian sighed, a loud, exaggerated sound. "Aaron, come on. The timer is a hassle. Plus, honestly, the cane kind of throws off the aesthetic, doesn't it? We want this to look robust." The room went dead silent. "Robust," I repeated. "You know what I mean," Julian said, checking his reflection in the mirror. "We want a happy, healthy family photo. You looking like Tiny Tim in the background is just a bit of a downer, bro." I looked at my parents. I waited for them to speak. I waited for my dad to slam his hand on the table. I waited for my mom to say, "If Aaron isn't in it, nobody is." My mom opened her mouth, but Julian cut her off. "Mom, don't fuss. The lighting is perfect right now. Aaron, just take the damn picture. Be useful for once." My dad looked at me. His eyes were unreadable. He looked tired. He gave a microscopic nod. I felt my stomach drop to the floor. They weren't going to fight for me. Even after everything I had done for them, I was still the outlier. The broken piece. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Fine," I said. I took the camera. I limped over to the tripod. I looked through the viewfinder. I saw my family. My parents looking frail. Julian and Brenda, looking like movie stars. Their smiles bright and predatory. Click. I took the photo. "Great," Brenda chirped, snatching the camera from me. "Let me see." "Oh, perfect. We look amazing." They went back to drinking their wine. I went into the kitchen and stood there for 20 minutes, staring at the sink, telling myself not to walk out into the snow and never come back. I didn't know it then, but that moment didn't go unnoticed. I thought my parents were weak. I thought they were choosing him. I was wrong. That night, after I went to bed, I heard my dad arguing with someone on the phone. His voice was muffled through the wall, but it sounded angry. I thought he was fighting with the insurance company again. I didn't know he was calling his lawyer. Back to the present. The day after the funeral. The day after Julian told me to find somewhere else to die. I woke up on the couch because I couldn't bring myself to sleep in my bed knowing I was being kicked out. My leg was stiff, the muscles tight like piano wire. I had 10 days. I started packing. It's a humiliating thing to pack your life into cardboard boxes while living in a mansion that your family owns but you aren't allowed to touch. I started with the books in the study. My dad's study. It still smelled like him, cherry tobacco and old paper. Julian hadn't come back since yesterday, but he had sent a text. "Realtor coming Friday at 9 a.m. Make sure the place doesn't smell like a hospital." As I was clearing out the bottom drawer of Dad's mahogany desk, my hand brushed against something taped to the underside of the drawer. It was a business card, cream-colored, thick stock. Harold Blackwood, ESQ estate attorney. On the back, in my father's shaky handwriting that had gotten worse in the last year, was a note. "Aaron, if you are reading this, I am gone. Call him immediately. Don't let Julian win." My heart hammered against my ribs. Don't let Julian win. Why would he write that? Julian was the executor. Julian was the heir. Everyone knew that. The draft will my mother had kept in the safe, the one I had seen years ago, left the bulk of the estate to the eldest surviving child. That was standard. That was the tradition my father's family had followed for generations. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the card. "Blackwood Law," a receptionist answered. "This is Aaron Sterling," I said. "Robert Sterling's son." There was a pause. Then the tone changed. It became urgent. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Blackwood has been expecting your call. Hold for one moment, please." Expecting my call? A moment later, a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. "Aaron, I was wondering when you'd find that card." "Mr. Blackwood," I said. "My brother, Julian. He says he's already spoken to you. He says he's the sole executor and that the house is being listed." A dry, mirthless chuckle came through the phone. "Your brother called my office 3 days ago, demanding the keys to the safe deposit box. My secretary told him to wait for the formal reading. He hasn't seen anything, Aaron." "He told me everything goes to him," I said. "He gave me an eviction notice. 10 days. He has no legal authority to evict a stray cat, let alone you, until the will is read," Blackwood said. His voice was sharp now. "Aaron, listen to me closely. Do not leave that house. Do not sign anything. And bring yourself to my office on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "But is there a point? If the will gives him the house." "Just be here, Aaron," Blackwood said. "And prepare yourself. Your parents were very observant people." He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, my hand trembling. Do not leave that house. I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in 2 years. It wasn't hope exactly. It was defiance. I stood up. I grabbed my cane. I walked to the front door where Julian had kicked my muddy boots aside. I picked them up and placed them neatly on the mat. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to see Mrs. Gable, our next-door neighbor. She was 70 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and tough as old leather. She was holding a casserole dish. "I saw that fancy car of your brother's yesterday," she said, marching past me into the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. "And I saw him shouting at you. That boy never did have any manners." "He's kicking me out, Mrs. Gable," I said, following her. She slammed the casserole onto the counter. "Over my dead body. Your mother told me things, Aaron. She told me how worried she was." "Worried about what?" "About him." She jerked her head toward the city. "About Julian. And that wife of his. Sharks, both of them. Your mother said they were drowning in debt." I stopped. "Debt? Julian? He's a hedge fund manager. He drives a Porsche." Mrs. Gable snorted. "You can lease a Porsche, honey, and you can fake a smile. But you can't fake the look of a man who's scared. I saw him a month ago, arguing with your father in the driveway. Your father was shouting. I heard him say, 'Not another cent, Julian.'" I leaned against the counter. This didn't make sense. Julian was the success story. I was the charity case. That was the narrative. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I may be old, Aaron, but I'm not deaf," she said. She reached out and patted my hand. Her skin was paper-thin but warm. "You stay put. And you eat this lasagna. You're too skinny." She left as quickly as she came, leaving me with a casserole and a revelation. Julian wasn't just cruel. He was desperate. If he was in debt, serious debt, that explained the rush. That explained why he needed me out in 10 days. He needed to sell the house to cover something. I looked at the calendar. 5 days until the will reading. I wasn't going anywhere. The next 3 days were a siege. I didn't pack another box. Instead, I unlocked the gate to the driveway so Julian couldn't block it again. I moved my stuff back into the bathroom. I occupied the space. On Friday night, 2 days before the reading, the storm broke. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard a key turn in the front lock. I stiffened. Julian walked in. But he wasn't the arrogant man from Tuesday. His tie was loosened, his hair was messy, and he looked gray. He didn't have Brenda with him. He stopped when he saw me. He saw that the boxes were gone. He saw that I was still settled in. "I thought I told you to pack," he said, but his voice lacked the usual bite. It sounded weary. "Mr. Blackwood told me to stay," I said calmly, taking a sip of tea. "He said you don't have the authority to evict me yet." Julian flinched at the lawyer's name. He walked over to the liquor cabinet, my father's cabinet, and poured himself a scotch. He drank it in one swallow. "Aaron," he said, turning to me. He leaned against the counter, and for a second he just looked like my big brother again. "Look, I know I was harsh on Tuesday. I'm under a lot of pressure." "Pressure?" I asked. "The market," he muttered. "It's been volatile. Look, I need this house sold, Aaron. I need the liquidity. Fast." "Mrs. Gable said she heard you asking Dad for money a month ago," I said. Julian's head snapped up. "That old bat needs to mind her own business." "Is it true, Julian?" I pressed. "Are you in trouble?" He slammed the glass down. "It's a temporary cash flow issue." "Okay." I leveraged some assets to cover a margin call. It went south. I need $400,000 by the end of the month or the bank seizes the apartment. And the cars. I stared at him. "400,000? Julian, that's insane." "It's manageable," he shouted, his face turning red. "Once I get the inheritance, I can clear it. But I need the house listed now so I can show the bank I have assets coming. If you keep squatting here, you're going to ruin me." "Squatting?" I stepped forward, my cane tapping hard on the tile. "I live here, Julian. I took care of them. You're asking me to be homeless so you can save your Porsche. I have a family to support," he yelled. "Brenda." The lifestyle. We can't just lose it all. You don't understand. You have nothing to lose. You're already at rock bottom. There it was again. The contempt. I'm not leaving, I said. We wait for the will. Julian looked at me with pure hatred. Fine. Wait for the will. It won't change anything. Dad was old-fashioned. Eldest son takes the estate. That's how it works. You're just delaying the inevitable. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I locked it behind him. My hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. He was terrified. The next day was Saturday. The memorial service. I didn't want to go. It was being held at an upscale Italian restaurant in town, Brenda's choice. But I knew I had to make an appearance. I put on my black suit. It was a little loose on me now. I had lost weight since the accident. I took my cane and drove to the venue. The room was full of people I barely recognized. Business associates of Julian's. Country club friends of my parents who I hadn't seen in years. Julian and Brenda were holding court near the bar. Brenda was wearing a black dress that cost more than my car. She was laughing. Actually laughing. I walked in, and the room seemed to quiet down. People looked at the cane. They looked at the limp. They looked away. I made my way to the buffet, just trying to get through the next hour. I heard Brenda's voice carrying over the crowd. She was talking to a group of women. "Oh yes, it's been so hard," she was saying. "Managing the funeral and everything. Poor Aaron. He's taking it very badly." "Is he okay?" one of the women asked. "I heard he was living with them." "Well," Brenda lowered her voice, but not enough. "He's been having episodes. Mental health struggles since the accident. We're actually looking into a facility for him. A nice place where he can get the help he needs. He's just not capable of living on his own." My blood ran cold. A facility? She was painting me as mentally unstable to justify kicking me out. I gripped my cane. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But before I could move, a small figure in a gray cardigan stepped into the circle. It was Elena, the hospice nurse who had helped me with Mom in the final weeks. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. "That's a lie," Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Brenda turned, looking annoyed. "Excuse me? Who are you?" "I'm the nurse who was with Eleanor every day for the last 6 months," Elena said. "And I know exactly who took care of her. It was Aaron. He bathed her. He read to her. He held her hand when the pain was bad." She looked Brenda right in the eye. "I never saw you there, Mrs. Sterling. Not once. Until the day she died." The circle of women went silent. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I think you should leave." Julian appeared, grabbing Elena's arm. "I'm leaving," Elena said, shaking him off. She walked straight over to me. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a thick, leather-bound notebook. "Your mother asked me to give you this," she whispered, pressing it into my hands. "She said not to read it until after the lawyer, but keep it close." "What is it?" I asked. "Her diary," Elena said. "And Aaron? There's a USB drive taped to the inside cover. Bring it to the meeting on Monday." She squeezed my hand. "They saw everything, Aaron. Don't forget that." She walked out, leaving me standing there with the book burning a hole in my hand. I looked across the room. Julian was staring at me, his face pale. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how wrong. Monday morning, 9:55 a.m. The offices of Blackwood and Associates were on the 40th floor of the Prudential Tower in Boston. The view was spectacular. The city spread out like a toy set below. I sat on one side of the massive mahogany conference table. Julian and Brenda sat on the other. Julian's leg was bouncing nervously under the table. Brenda was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, looking bored but tense. Harold Blackwood walked in at exactly 10 a.m. He was a man of about 60, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. He carried a thick leather briefcase. He didn't shake hands. He sat at the head of the table and placed the briefcase down. "Good morning," he said. We are here to read the last will and testament of Robert and Eleanor Sterling. Let's get this over with, Julian said, leaning forward. We know the drill. I have the copy Mom kept in the safe right here. He pulled out a stapled document and tossed it onto the table. Dated 2018, leaving the estate to me as executor and primary beneficiary. Standard. Blackwood didn't even look at the document. He just stared at Julian over the rim of his glasses. That document, Blackwood said calmly, is a draft. It was never notarized. And more importantly, it was revoked. Julian froze. Revoked? By what? Blackwood opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. It looked heavy. By this, Blackwood said. The last will and testament executed 6 months ago. Witnessed by myself and 2 of my paralegals. 6 months ago? Brenda snapped. That's impossible. Mom would have told us. Your mother, Blackwood said, turning his gaze to Brenda, chose to keep her counsel. Shall I read? Julian sat back, looking like he'd been punched in the gut. Read. Blackwood began. The legal language was dense, but the meaning became clear very quickly. To our son, Julian Robert Sterling. Julian straightened up. We leave our investment portfolio, valued at approximately $14 million. Julian let out a breath he had been holding. Brenda grabbed his hand, a smile breaking across her face. 14 million, she whispered. We're safe. To be held in a strict spendthrift trust, Blackwood continued, his voice raising slightly to cut through their celebration. The smile vanished from Brenda's face. A what? A trust, Blackwood said, managed by this firm. The beneficiary, Julian Sterling, shall have no access to the principal. He is to receive an annual stipend of $50,000, paid in monthly installments, to ensure he does not destitute himself. 50,000? Julian stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. 50,000 a year? That's a joke. I have debts bigger than that. I can't live on 50,000. The terms are ironclad, Blackwood said, flipping a page. Your parents were aware of your financial volatility. They wanted to ensure you always had enough for groceries, Julian. Not Ferraris. This is insane, Julian shouted. I'll contest it. I'll sue. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Blackwood barked. It was a command, not a request. Julian sat, breathing hard. Now, Blackwood turned to me. To our son, Aaron Michael Sterling. I gripped my cane. I held my breath. Who has been our rock, our caretaker, and our true companion in our final years. We leave the Sterling family estate, including the house, the land, and all contents therein. I gasped. The house. My home. Additionally, Blackwood continued, we leave the remainder of the liquid cash assets, approximately $4 million, directly to Aaron with no restrictions. However, there is a restriction on the house. Cannot be sold for a period of 10 years. We wish for Aaron to live there, to build a life there, as he helped us live ours. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Julian was staring at the table, his face a mask of shock. Brenda looked like she was going to be sick. He gets the house? Julian whispered. And the cash? And I get an allowance. You get safety, Julian, Blackwood said. Aaron gets the legacy. It's coercion, Brenda shrieked. He manipulated them. He was living there, poisoning their minds against us. Actually, Blackwood said, your parents anticipated this reaction. They left something for you. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a laptop. He plugged in a USB drive. It was the drive Elena had told me about. Watch, Blackwood said. He turned the screen toward us. The video started. It was filmed in the living room. Mom and Dad were sitting on the couch holding hands. Dad looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. Mom looked sad. Julian, Dad spoke first. His voice filled the quiet office. If you are watching this, you are probably angry. You probably think Aaron stole this from you. On the screen, Dad leaned forward. But Aaron didn't ask for a thing. In fact, he tried to leave 3 times because he felt like a burden. We made him stay. Mom spoke next. Her voice was soft. We love you, Julian. But we have eyes. We saw how you treated your brother after his accident. We saw the sneers. We heard the comments. Dad's voice came back, harder this time. And the Christmas photo. We watched you push him out of the frame. We watched you treat him like a piece of furniture that didn't fit your decor. That was the day, Julian. That was the day I realized that if I left you this house, you would throw Aaron onto the street before my body was cold. I felt tears pricking my eyes. They had seen it. We couldn't let that happen, Dad said. Aaron is the only one who knows the value of this family. Not the money, the family. So we are giving the house to the son who will keep the door open. The video ended. The screen went black. I looked at Julian. He was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. The reality of what he had done, and what it had cost him, was sinking in. He hadn't just lost the money. He had been exposed. His parents had died knowing exactly who he was. This can't be real, Brenda whispered. We need that money. The bank. They're going to take everything. Blackwood closed the laptop with a snap. The will is filed. The probate is already underway. The deed to the house will be transferred to Aaron by the end of the week. He looked at Julian. And Julian? Since the house now belongs to Aaron effective immediately, I believe you are the one who has, as you put it, 2 weeks to remove any personal items you may have stored there. Julian looked at me. His eyes were wide, desperate. The arrogance was gone. The cruelty was gone. All that was left was a terrified man who owed $400,000 to dangerous people, and whose only lifeline had just been cut. We walked out of the office in silence. The elevator ride down to the lobby was suffocating. When the doors opened, Julian didn't storm off. He didn't scream. He collapsed. He walked over to a bench in the lobby and sat down, burying his face in his hands. Brenda stood over him, furiously typing on her phone, probably calling her own lawyer, or maybe her mother. I walked out of the elevator slowly, my cane tapping against the marble floor. I felt light. For the first time in 2 years, the weight was gone. I had a home. I had a future. I could have walked away. I could have gotten in my car, driven back to my house, and locked the gate. I could have let Julian drown in the mess he created. God knows he would have done it to me. But then I remembered Dad's voice in the video. Aaron is the only one who knows the value of this family. I stopped. I turned around and walked back to the bench. Julian, I said. He looked up. His eyes were red. He looked pathetic. Aaron, he choked out. You have to help me. Please. You have $4 million in cash coming. I need a loan. The bank is going to take the apartment. They're going to take the cars. I'll lose my job if I declare bankruptcy. You should have thought of that before you bought a Porsche you couldn't afford, I said. I know. He grabbed my sleeve. I know I messed up. I know I was a jerk. But I'm your brother. Please, don't let them destroy me. Brenda looked up from her phone. Her eyes narrowed. He owes us, Julian. He lived off your parents for 2 years. It's only fair. I laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. Fair. I looked at Brenda. You told everyone I was mentally unstable. You tried to put me in a facility. You told me to find somewhere else to die. Brenda flinched, stepping back. I don't owe you a damn thing, I said. I looked back at Julian. He was weeping now. A grown man weeping in a public lobby. But, I said, I'm not you. Julian stopped crying. He looked at me with a glimmer of hope. I will pay off your debt, I said. The full $400,000. Directly to the bank. Not to you. Oh, thank God, Julian breathed. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. I'm not done, I said, holding up my hand. It's a loan. Interest-free, but I want a payment plan. And there is one condition. A non-negotiable condition. Anything, Julian said. Anything you want. Next Sunday, I said. I'm hosting a dinner at the house. I'm inviting Mrs. Gable. I'm inviting Elena. I'm inviting Aunt Dorothy and the cousins. I leaned in close so he could see the steel in my eyes. You and Brenda will come, and in front of everyone you will apologize. You will tell them exactly what you said to me on the day of the funeral. You will admit that you tried to kick your disabled brother onto the street. You will admit that you lied about my mental health. Julian's face went white. Aaron, that's humiliating. Can't we just keep it private? That's the price, I said. You wanted to destroy my dignity? Now you have to sacrifice yours to save your skin. I looked at Brenda. And you, Brenda, you will admit that you were the one who pushed me out of the Christmas photo. Brenda's jaw tightened. She looked at Julian. We can't do that. Think of our reputation. Think of your house, I said. Think of the bankruptcy court. I stood up straight, adjusting my coat. You have until Friday to decide. If you agree, come to dinner. If you don't show up, I keep my money, and you deal with the bank. I turned and walked toward the exit. Aaron, Julian called out. I didn't look back. I walked out into the crisp Boston air. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. I walked to my car, tossed my cane in the passenger seat, and drove home. My home. The days leading up to Sunday felt longer than the 2 years I spent in rehabilitation. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the lonely quiet of before. It was the silence of a held breath. I didn't sit around waiting. I worked. I channeled every ounce of my nervous energy into the estate. I hired a cleaning crew to scrub the house from top to bottom, erasing the mud Julian had tracked in and the lingering scent of his cologne. I went into the kitchen and prepped a menu that was simple but demanding: roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, glazed carrots. The kind of Sunday dinner my mother used to make before her arthritis took the strength from her hands. I called Mrs. Gable. I called Elena. I called Aunt Dorothy, my father's sister who had always looked down on me for not having a spine. I told them it was a celebration of life. I didn't tell them about the main event. Friday came and went. I didn't hear from Julian. Saturday passed in silence. By Sunday morning, I was convinced they wouldn't show. I sat on the back porch, drinking coffee, watching the mist lift off the rose bushes. If they didn't come, I would keep my $4 million. Julian would lose everything. Justice would be served cold. But a part of me, the part that remembered playing catch in this very yard 30 years ago, wanted them to show up. Not for the money, but because I needed to know if there was anything human left inside my brother. At 5 p.m., the guests arrived. Mrs. Gable brought her famous apple pie and a look of fierce determination. Aunt Dorothy arrived with her 2 daughters, looking around the house with a critical eye, checking for dust. Elena came last, wearing a simple dress, looking out of place among my relatives but standing taller than anyone else. We gathered in the living room. I served drinks. The conversation was polite, stilted. Everyone knew about the will reading. The rumors had spread through the town like wildfire. They knew I had the house. They knew Julian had been cut off. They looked at me differently now. Aunt Dorothy actually asked me about my physical therapy with genuine interest, or at least a very good performance of it. Then, at 5:45 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't the Porsche. It was Brenda's Mercedes SUV. They walked up the path slowly. Julian looked like he had aged 10 years in 5 days. His suit was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved. Brenda was wearing big sunglasses, even though the sun had already set. She looked like she was walking to her execution. I opened the door. You came, I said. We had a deal, Julian rasped. His voice sounded like sandpaper. Come in, I said, stepping aside. The room went deadly silent when they entered. Aunt Dorothy put down her sherry glass. Mrs. Gable crossed her arms. Hello, everyone, Julian said to the floor. Dinner is served, I announced. We moved to the dining room. I sat at the head of the table, my father's seat. Julian and Brenda sat on the side, squeezed between Elena and Mrs. Gable. The tension was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. We ate in near silence for 20 minutes. The only sounds were the clinking of silverware and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Brenda barely touched her food. She kept checking her phone under the table until I cleared my throat. "Put the phone away, Brenda," I said quietly. "We're having a family dinner." She glared at me, her eyes venomous behind her heavy makeup, but she put the phone in her purse. When the plates were cleared, I stood up. I leaned on the table with both hands, looking at each face in the room. "I want to thank you all for coming," I began. "It's been a hard week, a hard 2 years. But today marks a new beginning for this house. And for this family." I turned my gaze to Julian. He was staring at his water glass, his knuckles white as he gripped the stem. "Julian," I said, "I believe you had something you wanted to share with the family." Julian froze. He looked up at me, pleading with his eyes one last time. "Don't make me do this." I didn't blink. I just waited. Julian took a shaky breath. He pushed his chair back and stood up. He looked around the table. He looked at Aunt Dorothy, whose judgmental gaze was now fixed on him. He looked at Elena, the nurse he had tried to fire. Julian started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to apologize." "To whom, Julian?" I asked. "To Aaron," he said. "And to Mom and Dad." "Be specific," I said. My voice was calm, but it left no room for negotiation. Julian closed his eyes. "Last week, after the funeral, I came here. I told Aaron he had 2 weeks to move out." A gasp went around the table. Aunt Dorothy's hand flew to her mouth. "He told me he had nowhere to go," Julian continued, the words tumbling out now, painful and ugly. "He asked for time. I told him no. I told him." He stopped. He couldn't say it. "Say it," I commanded. "I told him to find somewhere else to die," Julian whispered. "I told him he was useless." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. Mrs. Gable made a sound of pure disgust. Elena wiped a tear from her eye. "And why did you do that, Julian?" I asked. "Because I needed the money," he confessed, hanging his head. "Because I'm broke. Because I was jealous that he was the one they trusted." He sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. He was broken. The golden child had finally tarnished. I turned to Brenda. She was staring straight ahead, her jaw set. "Brenda," I said. "I have nothing to say," she snapped. "The deal includes both of you," I reminded her. "Or the bank gets a call tomorrow morning." Brenda stood up. She didn't look broken like Julian. She looked furious. She looked like a trapped animal. "Fine," she spat. "I pushed you out of the photo. Are you happy? I thought you looked pathetic with that cane. I didn't want my friends to see that we had a cripple in the family." "Brenda," Aunt Dorothy shouted, standing up. "How dare you? It's the truth." Brenda yelled back, losing her composure entirely. "We were the successful ones. We were the ones who were supposed to inherit this. He was just the help." "The help?" I repeated softly. "Is that what you think compassion is? Hired help?" "I think you manipulated them," Brenda screamed. "You played the victim and you stole our money." "That's enough," Julian said. He stood up again, grabbing Brenda's arm. "Stop it, Brenda. Just stop." "Don't touch me," she shrieked, pulling away. "You lost us this money, Julian. You and your stupid gambling. You're a loser. And now we have to beg him for scraps." She looked at me with pure hatred. "Keep your money, Aaron. I'm not doing this." She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the dining room. We heard the front door slam, followed by the sound of the Mercedes starting up and peeling out of the driveway. She had left him, right there, in front of everyone. Julian stood there, alone. His wife was gone. His dignity was gone. He looked at me. "Aaron, Sit down, Julian," I said gently. He sat. He looked like a child. "She's gone," he whispered. "She was gone a long time ago," Mrs. Gable said, pouring herself more wine. "Good riddance to bad rubbish." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I slid it across the table to Julian. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a cashier's check," I said, "for $400,000. Made out to the bank. Julian stared at it. But Brenda didn't apologize. She ruined it. You apologized, I said, and she showed everyone exactly who she is. That was enough for me. Julian touched the envelope with trembling fingers. I don't deserve this. No, I agreed. You don't. But Mom and Dad wouldn't want you in prison. And neither do I. I stood up. Take the check, Julian. Pay the debt. Sell the apartment. Start over. But do it somewhere else. You're not welcome in this house until you figure out how to be a human being again. Julian nodded. He took the envelope. He didn't eat. He couldn't. 10 minutes later, he left. He walked down the driveway alone into the dark to call a taxi because his wife had taken the car. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the living room. It was finally quiet, but the air felt lighter. The toxicity that had poisoned this family for years had finally been drawn out. It was painful, yes, but the wound was clean. 6 months later, it was May. The garden was in full bloom. The roses my mother had planted 30 years ago were exploding in riots of pink and white. The new hydrangeas I had added were thriving in the shade of the old oak tree. I sat on the bench I had built near the vegetable patch. My leg was better. Not perfect, it would never be perfect, but I walked 3 miles every morning now. The cane was leaning against the bench, more of a precaution than a necessity these days. I opened the leather-bound notebook Elena had given me. For months, I hadn't been able to finish it. I read it in small doses, savoring my mother's voice. Today, I turned to the last entry. It was dated 3 days before the crash. Robert and I sat in the garden today, she wrote. Aaron was working on the trellis. He didn't know we were watching. He moves with such pain, but he never stops. He treats the plants with such tenderness. I realized today that he isn't broken. We were the broken ones, worrying about appearances and legacies. Aaron is the glue. He is the mirror that reflects the best of us, while Julian reflects our fears. I worry about Julian. He is so lost in the chase for more that he has forgotten enough. I hope one day he finds his way back. But I know Aaron will be the lighthouse. He always was. If you are reading this, my sweet boy, know that you were never useless. You were essential. I closed the book. I looked up at the blue sky. A single hawk was circling overhead. I know, Mom, I whispered. I know. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Julian. Approved for the rental in Queens. It's small, but it's mine. Job interview on Tuesday at a logistics firm. Entry level, but it's a start. Thank you. He and Brenda had divorced 2 weeks after the dinner. It was messy. She took whatever jewelry she could hide, but the prenup held. Julian was starting over from zero. He was living on the allowance from the trust and whatever he could earn. He was driving a 10-year-old Honda. We weren't best friends. We probably never would be. But last week we had coffee. He didn't check his phone once. He asked me how the garden was. It was a start. I stood up, grabbing the cane. I had work to do. I had just taken on a new client, my first real architectural commission since the accident. It was a community park project in the city. Accessible design. Place for everyone. I walked back toward the house that was no longer a symbol of my failure, but the foundation of my future. They told me to find somewhere else to die. Instead, I found a reason to live. I found home. This story isn't just about inheritance, revenge, or money. At its core, it is a story about identity and boundaries. For years, I let my family define my worth. I accepted the label of useless because I was physically broken and financially dependent. I allowed Julian's bullying because I believed, deep down, that his money made him superior. That is a trap so many of us fall into. We measure our dignity by our bank accounts or our physical abilities. But the moment I drew a line in the sand, the moment I refused to leave the house and demanded an apology, I reclaimed my power. The money didn't save me. My self-respect did. The inheritance was just the tool. The boundary was the victory. We teach people how to treat us. If we stay silent, we are complicit in our own disrespect. Whether it's a toxic sibling, a manipulative partner, or an unfair boss, the dynamic changes only when you change it. And now I want to hear from you. What is the one line in the sand you have had to draw with a family member or friend to protect your peace? Was it hard? Did they respect it? Drop a comment below with your story. Or, if this story resonated with you and you agree that dignity is non-negotiable, just type the word "good" in the comments. Seeing that word tells me that we are on the same page and that you stand for justice just like I do. Thank you for listening. Thank you for walking this road with me. Remember, you are never useless, and you are always enough.